Humble farmer bought an old tractor. What he found hidden changed his life. Frank Miller had trembling hands as he held the yellowed papers he had just found. His breathing was uneven, and sweat streamed down his sun-tanned face, even though it was early morning in the small town of Oakfield, in the countryside of Pennsylvania. It was while fiddling with the broken seat of the tractor he had bought the previous week that he discovered the secret compartment. Inside it, a rusty metal box held documents that looked very old, and a golden wedding ring with inscriptions he couldn't read properly. "Frank, what happened?" asked Martha, his wife of 32 years, appearing in the barn doorway with her apron stained with flour. She had heard the sound of tools falling to the ground when her husband shouted in surprise upon making the discovery. "Martha, you won't believe what I found in here," said Frank, still looking at the papers in disbelief. The woman approached, wiping her hands on her apron. At 58, Martha had graying hair always tied in a bun, and brown eyes that showed the wisdom of someone who raised 4 children with very little money. "What are these papers, Frank?" she asked, feeling a worry growing in her chest. "They look like old deeds. Look here." He pointed to a document that had official stamps. "And it has the name of the previous owner of this tractor. It belonged to William Thompson." Martha felt a shiver. William Thompson had been the father of the town's current mayor, Richard Thompson. Everyone knew the Thompson family owned a lot of land in the region, but nobody questioned how they had acquired so much property. "Frank, maybe it's better to leave this alone," Martha said in a low voice. "You know what that Thompson family is like? They don't like people meddling in their business." But Frank was fascinated by the documents. There were land deeds, old contracts, and even a letter that seemed never to have been sent. The name that appeared most often on the papers was precisely William Thompson's, always as the beneficiary of inheritances and sales. "Martha, I need to understand what all this means," Frank said, carefully storing the papers in an old folder. "Tomorrow, I'll stop by the county clerk's office to see if I can find out something about these lands." That night, Frank couldn't sleep. He stayed in the kitchen until late, examining each document under the weak light of the lamp. There was something in the papers that deeply troubled him, but he couldn't identify what it was. Martha watched him from the bedroom door, worried about her husband's sudden obsession. She knew Frank too well to know that when he set his mind on something, there was no force in the world that could make him give up. The next day, Frank woke up early as always and tended to the animals. He had a few chickens, 2 pigs, and a dairy cow that were the family's source of income, along with the small vegetable garden that Martha tended. After lunch, Frank went downtown. The Oakfield County Clerk's office was in an old house on Main Street, next to his friend Harold's pharmacy. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. "Good morning, Mrs. Edith," Frank greeted the clerk's office employee, a 60-year-old lady who had worked there for over 20 years. "Hi, Frank, how are you? What brings you here today?" she asked, adjusting her glasses on her nose. "Mrs. Edith, could you help me understand some documents I found?" He showed her some of the papers he had brought. When Mrs. Edith saw the documents, her face changed completely. She looked around, checked that there was no one else in the clerk's office, and signaled for Frank to come closer. "Frank, where did you find this?" she whispered, her voice nervous. "I found it inside the old tractor I bought from Mr. Peter. It belonged to the late William Thompson." Mrs. Edith grew even more nervous. She looked at the door again and lowered her voice even further. "Frank, these lands here in these papers were improperly taken many years ago. I was working here when it happened, but I was very young and afraid to say anything." "What do you mean, Mrs. Edith?" "Several families lost their lands in strange ways back then. Sales documents would appear that no one remembered signing, or inheritances that didn't exist, always benefiting the Thompson family." Frank felt a chill in his stomach. This confirmed his suspicions that there was something wrong with those documents. "Are you sure about this?" "I am, Frank. But I could never say anything because I was afraid of losing my job. The Thompson family has a lot of influence in town." Frank thanked her for the information and went home with his mind racing. On the way, he stopped to think about everything he had discovered. If those documents proved there were irregularities, maybe other families had been harmed too. When he got home, he found Martha in the vegetable garden, watering the tomato plants. "So, did you find out anything?" she asked, wiping the sweat from her forehead. "I did, Martha, and it's not good." Frank told her everything Mrs. Edith had said. Martha stopped watering the plants and looked at him with concern. "Frank, I told you it's dangerous to get involved in these things. The Thompson family can do anything to protect their interests. But Martha, what if our own land is involved in this? What if other families were robbed too? We can't just stay quiet." That same afternoon, while Frank was fixing the back fence, he heard the sound of a car stopping in front of the house. It was a black, shiny car, very different from the old cars that usually passed by. A man in a suit got out of the car despite the afternoon heat. It was Richard Thompson, the town's mayor. Frank felt his heart race. "Good afternoon, Frank," said Richard, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I heard you bought a tractor from Mr. Peter." "Yes, I did, Mr. Richard. Why do you ask?" "It's just that tractor belonged to my late father. It has sentimental value for my family, you understand." The mayor walked towards the shed where the tractor was. "I'd like to buy it back. I'll pay double what you paid." Frank felt there was something strange about that offer. No one pays double for an old tractor for sentimental reasons. "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Richard, but I need the tractor to work." The mayor's smile became forced. "Frank, you know that sometimes accidents happen with old machines. It would be a shame if something happened to you or your family because of a faulty tractor." The veiled threat did not go unnoticed. Frank felt his blood run cold, but he tried to stay calm. "I'll think about your offer, Mr. Richard." "Think carefully, Frank. Think very carefully," said the mayor, getting back into his car. After Richard left, Martha appeared at the door of the house. She had heard the whole conversation. "Frank, now you see what I was talking about. They already know you found something." "Martha, this just confirms that something is really wrong. Why would he be so desperate to buy an old tractor?" That night, Frank went to the shed and examined all the documents again. It was then that he found a letter that had gone unnoticed. It was a handwritten letter, never sent, signed by William Thompson. The letter was addressed to a certain Joseph Miller, and it spoke of regret and a desire to correct past mistakes. William confessed to having used false documents to take over lands that didn't belong to him, including lands that belonged to the Miller family. Frank felt his legs go weak. Miller was his last name. Could that letter have been intended for one of his relatives? The next day, Frank went to see his mother, Mrs. Grace, who was 83 years old and lived in a small house in the center of town. "Mom, do you remember any Joseph Miller in our family?" Mrs. Grace stopped peeling potatoes and looked at her son with curiosity. "Joseph Miller was your grandfather, Frank. Why are you asking? Tell me about him, Mom." "Your grandfather Joseph had a large property here in Oakfield, but he lost everything in a strange way, right after you were born. A man named William Thompson showed up saying he had bought the lands from Joseph, but my father swore he had never sold anything." Frank felt the world spin. The letter he found was addressed to his own grandfather. "What happened after that, Mom?" "Your grandfather was so shaken that he had a heart problem and passed away soon after. Your grandmother was left with nothing, which is why you've always lived such a tight life." Frank went home in a state of shock. Not only had he discovered old frauds, but he found out that his own family had been a victim of them. Martha immediately noticed that something had happened. "Frank, you're pale. What is it?" He told her everything his mother had said. Martha was silent for a long time. "Frank, does that mean those lands that belong to your grandfather are rightfully ours?" "I think so, Martha. And if it's true, other families may have been robbed in the same way." That same afternoon, Frank received an unexpected visit from Mrs. Betty, his 65-year-old neighbor, a woman who had always been reserved but who knew the history of the entire region. "Frank, can I talk to you about something important?" she asked with a mysterious air. "Of course, Mrs. Betty. Sit here on the porch. Frank, I know you found some papers in William Thompson's tractor." Frank was surprised. "How did she know that?" "Who told you that?" "My late husband worked for many years at the records office before Mrs. Edith. He told me about the Thompson family's frauds, but asked me to never say anything while he was alive. Frank felt he was about to discover important information. "What did your husband tell you?" "He said that William Thompson had a scheme with some people at the records office. They forged documents, invented sales that never happened, created fake inheritances. Many families lost their lands that way." "Mrs. Betty, why are you telling me this now?" "Because my husband left some things put away before he passed. Documents he copied in secret, to have proof of what was happening. He always wanted to see justice done, but he was afraid." Mrs. Betty's revelation opened up a world of possibilities. Frank realized he wasn't alone in this discovery. "Do you still have those documents?" "I do, and if you want to do something to correct these injustices, I will help you." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like, and especially to subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. In the following days, Frank and Mrs. Betty met several times to examine all the documents. What they discovered was frightening. At least 15 families in the region had lost their lands through frauds orchestrated by William Thompson. Martha, initially reluctant, began to support her husband's investigations when she realized the scale of the injustice. "Frank, you are right. We can't let this go. How many families are still suffering today because of this greed?" It was then that Frank had an idea. His daughter Jessica, 28 years old, had graduated from law school the previous year and was working at a law firm in Philadelphia. "Martha, I'm going to call Jessica. If there's anyone who can help us understand the legal side of all this, it's her." Jessica was shocked when her father told her everything over the phone. "Dad, this is very serious. If everything you're saying is true, we're looking at a fraud scheme that has hurt a lot of people. Honey, can you come here this weekend? I need your help." "Of course, Dad. I'm already organizing my schedule." While waiting for his daughter to arrive, Frank continued his investigations. He discovered that the current mayor, William Thompson, had not only inherited the fraudulent lands from his father, but also kept the same scheme running with the help of people at the county clerk's office and city hall. On Friday afternoon, Jessica arrived from Philadelphia driving a small used car she had bought with her first savings as a lawyer. She was a determined young woman who had studied hard to graduate from a public university. "Dad, show me all the documents you found," she said as soon as she arrived. Frank, Martha, Mrs. Betty, and Jessica spent the entire night examining the papers. Jessica took notes and explained the legal implications of each discovery. "Dad, these lands that belong to Grandpa Joseph are rightfully ours. And what's more, other families can also claim their properties." "But honey, how are we going to prove it after so many years?" "The documents you found are proof enough, especially this confessional letter from William Thompson. It admits to the fraud and specifically mentions Grandpa's lands. On Saturday morning, Jessica suggested they look for other families who might have been harmed. We need to form a group. Together, we'll be stronger to face the Thompson family in court." The first person they went to was his compadre Harold, the owner of the pharmacy. Harold had lost a small rural property 15 years ago under strange circumstances. "Harold, do you remember how you lost that land you had by the reservoir?" "I do, Frank. A document appeared saying my father had sold the land to William Thompson before he passed, but I was sure that never happened." "Harold, we have proof that you were deceived. Do you want to join us to recover what is rightfully yours?" Harold was silent for a few minutes. Then his eyes filled with tears. "Frank, you don't know how much I suffered losing that land. It was the inheritance my father left for me. If there's a chance to get it back, I definitely want in." The news spread quickly through the town. Other neighbors began seeking out Frank to tell their own stories of suspicious land losses. Mrs. Rose, 70 years old, had lost a piece of land where she grew vegetables to sell at the market. Mr. Benjamin lost an area where he raised cattle. Family after family came forward with similar accounts. On Sunday, Jessica organized a meeting in the church community hall. Nearly 40 people attended, all with stories of suspicious property losses. "Everyone, I'm Frank's daughter, and I'm a lawyer," Jessica introduced herself. "We have discovered evidence that many families here have been victims of land documentation fraud. A murmur filled the room. Some people cried upon hearing their long-held suspicions being confirmed. "What can we do now?" asked Mrs. Rose. "We can file a class action lawsuit. Together we have enough evidence to reverse these injustices." Mr. Benjamin, a 68-year-old man who had always been quiet, stood up to speak. "Miss, I lost my land 20 years ago and never managed to raise my cattle properly again. If there's a chance to get back what's mine, I'm ready to face anyone." Mr. Benjamin's determination infected the whole group. One by one, the families decided to join the legal action. But in the middle of the meeting, someone ran in to warn that several City Hall cars were surrounding the church. "Folks, we'd better call it a day for now," suggested Jessica. "But don't be discouraged. Let's continue our work." On Monday, Frank woke up and found his fence cut and part of his cattle loose on the road. A note had been left on the door. "Forget what you found, or worse things might happen." Martha was terrified, but Frank only became more determined. "Martha, this just confirms they're scared. It means we're on the right track." That same day, city inspectors showed up at Frank's property looking for violations. They checked if the animals' vaccinations were up to date, if the livestock met regulations, if the vegetable garden had the proper licenses. "Frank Miller, do you have a license to raise pigs?" asked one of the inspectors with an arrogant air. "Yes, I do, sir." Frank showed the documents he always kept organized. The inspectors were clearly disappointed not to find any violations. After they left, Frank was visited by the town's retired accountant, Mr. Walter, a 72-year-old man who had worked at City Hall for 40 years. "Frank, can I speak with you in private?" "Of course, Mr. Walter. Let's go out to the porch." "Frank, I know what you're doing and I want to help you." "How so?" "I worked at City Hall during the administrations of William and now Richard Thompson. I saw a lot of wrong things happen, but I was always afraid to speak up." Frank felt he was about to receive important information. "What kind of wrong things, Mr. Walter?" "Fake documents, altered records, taxes collected on land that didn't exist. I kept copies of everything for years, waiting for the right time to use them." "Why did you never speak up before?" "Frank, the Thompson family has a lot of power in this town. They can destroy anyone who opposes them. But seeing your courage, I decided it's time to do the right thing." Mr. Walter brought a box full of documents he had secretly copied during his working years. Among them were records that proved how the frauds were carried out. "Frank, there's one thing you need to know. The lands that belong to your grandfather Joseph include exactly the property where you live today." Frank was confused. "What do you mean, Mr. Walter? You've been paying rent to the Thompson family for land that is rightfully yours. Your grandfather never sold this property. It was stolen through fake documents." The revelation left Frank in a state of shock. All these years he and his family had been paying rent for land that was already theirs. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. When Martha learned of the discovery, she sat in the kitchen chair and stared at the floor for a long time. "Frank, are you telling me we've been paying rent for 30 years for land that was already ours?" "That's right, Martha. And if it weren't for that tractor, we would never have found out. How many years of our lives did we spend without money for other things because we had to pay this rent?" Frank remembered all the times they had to give up important things for lack of money. The times the children wanted to take courses and they couldn't pay. The times Martha needed medical treatment and they had to wait for public care. That same week, rumors about Frank's mental sanity began to circulate around town. People were saying he was going crazy and seeing things that weren't there in the old papers. "Martha, are you hearing these rumors about me?" Frank asked, visibly shaken. "I am, Frank, but I know you're not crazy. I saw the documents with my own eyes." The psychological pressure was affecting the whole family. Martha started having high blood pressure problems because of the stress. One morning she woke up feeling very unwell and had to be taken to the hospital. "Doctor, what's wrong with my wife?" Frank asked the doctor, worried. "Her blood pressure is very high. It seems she's under a lot of stress. It's important for her to stay calm in the coming days." Seeing Martha in the hospital left Frank devastated. He blamed himself for putting the family in that difficult situation, but it was at the hospital that Frank received an unexpected visit. His son Michael, 32 years old, who had left home 5 years earlier after a terrible fight with his father. "Dad, I heard Mom was hospitalized," Michael said, clearly uncomfortable. "Michael, son, I'm so glad you came." Frank was emotional seeing his son after so long. Michael had left home because he wanted to try his luck in Chicago, but Frank thought he should stay and help with the property. The fight had been so serious that they hadn't spoken since. "Dad, Jessica told me about this story with the documents. Is it all true?" Frank told his son everything he had discovered. Michael was impressed by the scale of the problems. "Dad, I'm sorry for fighting with you. I was young and stubborn." "Michael, I'm sorry too, son. I should have understood that you had the right to choose your own path." Father and son hugged for the first time in 5 years, right there in the hospital corridor. Michael decided to stay a few days to help the family. He had learned a lot about computers and the internet in Chicago, knowledge that would be useful for organizing and protecting the evidence they had collected. "Dad, we need to digitize all these documents and make several copies. If anything happens to the originals, we lose everything." While Martha recovered in the hospital, Frank, Michael, and Jessica worked together organizing all the evidence. For the first time in years, Frank felt complete with both children by his side. In the middle of this process, a witness nobody expected appeared. Mrs. Francis, 80 years old, had been a nurse at the city hospital for decades. She sought out Frank after hearing the rumors about the documents that were found. "Mr. Frank, I need to tell you something important," said Mrs. Francis, her voice trembling. "What is it, Mrs. Francis?" "I took care of William Thompson in his final days. He was very sick and had a heavy conscience. He confessed to me about the frauds he had committed." Frank couldn't believe what he was hearing. "He really confessed?" "Yes, he did. He said he had stolen land from many families and that he wanted to make things right before he passed, but he didn't have time. I even wrote down some of the things he said in my nursing diary." Mrs. Francis still had the diary from 40 years ago with detailed notes of William Thompson's confessions. With this new evidence, Jessica became convinced they had a very strong case in court. "Dad, with Mrs. Francis's diary, the original documents and Mr. Walter's records, our case is very well founded." But the pressures against the family continued. Frank started receiving strange offers from people wanting to buy his property for prices well above market value. One day, a man in a suit showed up saying he represented a large agribusiness company interested in buying land in the region. "Mr. Frank, our company is offering an exceptional price for your property. It's an offer no one would refuse. Why do you specifically want my land?" Frank asked, suspicious. "It's just that its location is strategic for our expansion plans," the man replied, but Frank noticed he was nervous. "I need to think about the proposal," Frank said. After the man left, Michael commented, "Dad, this is very strange. Why would anyone pay so much for our little piece of land?" Jessica suspected there was something behind that generous offer. "Dad, I think someone is trying to get you to drop the lawsuit. If you sell the land and leave town, the case against the Thompson family becomes much weaker." Frank realized his daughter was right. It was an attempt to take him out of the game by offering money. "Jessica, as tempting as this offer is, we can't give up now. Many families are counting on us." That same night, Frank went to the shed where the tractor that had started this whole discovery was. He stood looking at the old rusty machine, thinking about how something so simple had changed their lives so much. "If it weren't for you, we would never have discovered the truth," he said to the tractor, as if talking to an old friend. Martha was discharged from the hospital a few days later, but the doctors recommended she avoid very stressful situations. "Frank, I'm fine, but I need you to promise me one thing," she said when they got home. "Anything you want, Martha. Promise me we won't give up this fight, for our children and grandchildren, for the memory of your grandfather Joseph, and for all the families that were robbed." "I promise, Martha. I promise we'll see this through to the end." Martha's determination gave Frank even more strength. Even though she had suffered from the stress of the situation, she didn't want to give up the search for justice. Jessica had returned to Philadelphia to prepare the legal documentation, but she kept in constant contact with the family. She was working with some lawyer colleagues to build the best case possible. It was then that news arrived that no one expected. A journalist from the regional newspaper had heard about the story and wanted to do a report on the fraud. "Mr. Frank, my name is Richard and I work for the Valley Herald. Can I talk to you about this story of the fake documents?" Frank was hesitant at first, but he realized the press could help spread the truth. "Yes, you can, son. But I want you to know that everything I'm going to tell you is backed by evidence." Richard was impressed by the amount of evidence Frank had gathered. He spent 2 days in town talking to the affected families and examining the documents. The report was published in a special edition of the newspaper with the headline, "Families from Oakfield were victims of land document fraud." The story caused a huge impact in the region. People from neighboring towns started getting in touch, saying they had also lost land under suspicious circumstances involving the Thompson family. Mayor William Thompson was furious about the report and tried to deny everything through an official statement. "The accusations made against my family are slanderous and will be addressed in court," the statement said. But the damage was already done. Public opinion was divided between those who supported the harmed families and those who remained loyal to the Thompson family. Frank started receiving support from people he didn't even know. An elderly lady from a neighboring town sent a letter saying her late husband had also lost land under strange circumstances involving the Thompson family. A farmer from a nearby area came to talk to Frank in person. "Mr. Frank, my name is Anthony Scott, and I lost 200 acres to the Thompson family 15 years ago. After reading the report, I want to join your group." The case was taking on proportions that no one had imagined. Jessica had to return from Philadelphia to help organize all the new additions to the lawsuit. "Dad, it's already more than 60 families wanting to join the action. This is going to be the biggest civil lawsuit in the region's history." But with the movement's growth, the pressures also increased. Frank began receiving anonymous threatening phone calls. "If you don't stop this foolishness, something could happen to your family," said an unrecognizable voice. Frank didn't tell Martha about the threats, but she noticed he was more nervous than usual. "Frank, are you hiding something from me?" "It's nothing important, Martha." "Frank Miller, I've been married to you for over 30 years. I know when you're lying to me." Frank ended up telling her about the phone calls. Martha was frightened, but she kept her determination. "Frank, this just proves they're scared. If they've reached the point of making threats, it's because they know they're going to lose." The preparation of the lawsuit was taking a lot of the family's time and energy. Jessica had taken a leave of absence from her job to dedicate herself fully to the case. "Dad, I'm going to open my own law office here in town. That way I can follow the lawsuit more closely and also help other people who need legal services." "Are you sure, daughter? Leaving your job in the capital is a very important decision." "I'm sure, Dad. This case has changed my view of what I want to do as a lawyer. I want to help ordinary people like you get access to justice." Michael also decided to stay in town longer to help the family. He had gotten a remote job in Chicago and could work from anywhere with internet. "Dad, I learned a lot about organization and management in Chicago. I can help you better organize the property and even increase the income." Frank was moved seeing his 2 children working together for the family. That crisis had brought all of them closer in a way he had never imagined. The group of affected families kept growing. They met every week in the church community hall to follow the lawsuit's progress. Mrs. Rose, who had lost her vegetable garden, became one of the group's leaders. "Folks, we can't give up now. For many years we swallowed injustices in silence. Now we have a chance to get back what's ours." Mr. Benjamin, the cattle rancher, also stood out as a strong voice in the group. "I spent 20 years blaming myself for losing my land, thinking I had done something wrong. Now I know I was truly robbed." The group meetings were emotional moments, where people who had suffered alone for years discovered they were not isolated in their problems. It was at one of these meetings that another important witness appeared. Mrs. Merrill, 75 years old, had been a secretary at the county clerk's office a long time ago. "Folks, I know it's been a long time, but I need to talk about what I saw at the clerk's office when I worked there." "What did you see, Mrs. Merrill?" asked Frank. I saw William Thompson arriving with documents already prepared and asking to have them recorded without the normal checks. He always came with money to facilitate the process. Do you have any proof of this? I was always very organized and kept some notes about the strangest cases. They're at home in an old box. Mrs. Merrill's notes detailed dates, amounts, and names involved in the frauds. They were more important pieces for the puzzle Jessica was putting together. With so much evidence being uncovered, Jessica began to believe they had a real chance of winning in court. Dad, I've never seen a case with so much evidence pointing to the same conclusion. I think we have a great chance of victory. But the lawsuit was taking a long time to actually get started. Justice in the region was slow, and there were suspicions that the Thompson family was using their influence to delay everything. Frank began to grow impatient with the wait. Jessica, why is it taking so long for the trial to start? Dad, the American justice system is slow, especially in complex cases like ours, but this also gives us more time to gather evidence. While they waited for the legal process to move forward, Frank decided to make some improvements to the property. Michael helped him repair the chicken coop and expand the vegetable garden. Dad, regardless of the outcome of the lawsuit, we can improve our quality of life right here, Michael said as they fixed the new fence. Michael, I'm happy to see you working here with me. I thought we'd never have this opportunity again. Dad, I miss this too. Chicago is good for professional growth, but it doesn't have the warmth of family. Martha watched from a distance as the father and son worked together, feeling grateful that this difficult situation had brought the family closer. It was during one of these afternoons of work that Frank received a visit that would change everything. An elegant woman, about 50 years old, stepped out of an imported car and approached them. "Good afternoon. I'm looking for Mr. Frank Miller," she said with an accent that wasn't from the region. "That's me. How can I help you?" "My name is Helen Thompson. I'm the granddaughter of William Thompson." Frank and Michael were surprised. What would a granddaughter of William Thompson be doing there? "I came here because I need to talk to you about the documents you found in the tractor." Frank became defensive. "If you've come to try to convince me to drop the lawsuit, you're wasting your time." "I didn't come for that, Mr. Frank. I came to help you." The statement left everyone confused. Why would a granddaughter of the man who committed the frauds want to help them? "What do you mean you want to help us?" asked Michael. "Because I know my grandfather committed terrible injustices, and my family has spent decades benefiting from those injustices." Helen explained that she had moved to Chicago when she was young and built her own life away from the family business in Oakfield. "When I found out through the newspaper report about the lawsuit you are filing, I decided it was time to do the right thing." "But you are going against your own family," observed Frank. "Mr. Frank, I have enough money to live well without needing stolen land. My conscience is worth more than any dirty inheritance." Helen revealed that she had her own documents proving her grandfather's frauds. "My grandfather left a detailed diary of all the frauds he committed. My grandmother gave me this diary before she passed away, asking me to seek justice when the right time came." William Thompson's diary was even more revealing than all the other documents combined. It described exactly how he carried out each fraud, who helped him, and how much he paid for each favor. "Mrs. Helen, why are you doing this?" asked Frank, still suspicious. "Because I have children, Mr. Frank, and I don't want them to grow up benefiting from money stolen from hard-working families like yours." Helen's arrival with the diary completely revolutionized the case. Jessica was thrilled when she saw the new evidence. "Dad, with William Thompson's own diary confessing to the frauds, our victory is practically guaranteed." The news that a granddaughter of William Thompson was supporting the victims spread quickly through the town. Many people were shocked, while others admired the young woman's courage. Mayor Richard Thompson was furious with his cousin and tried to prevent her from submitting the diary to the court. "Helen, you are betraying our family," he said during a tense meeting at her grandmother's house. "Richard, I am not betraying anyone. I'm correcting mistakes that should have been corrected a long time ago. If you do this, you'll be destroying everything our grandfather built." "Our grandfather built his fortune on theft and fraud, Richard. That's nothing to be proud of." The feud between the Thompson cousins divided the family even further, Some supported Helen, others sided with the mayor. Meanwhile, Frank continued to receive increasingly generous offers to sell his property and drop the lawsuit. Even a famous lawyer from Philadelphia showed up offering $1 million settlement. "Mr. Frank, my clients are willing to pay a very substantial amount to resolve this matter out of court." "What kind of amount?" Frank asked out of curiosity. "5 million reais divided among all the families involved in the lawsuit." Frank was impressed by the amount, but he had made his decision long before. "Doctor, I appreciate the offer, but it's not about money. It's about justice." "Mr. Frank, do you understand that 5 million is enough money for several generations of your family to live well?" "I understand, Doctor, but I also understand that if we accept this settlement, we'll be agreeing with the injustices that were committed." When the lawyer left, Martha commented, "Frank, 5 million is a lot of money. Are you sure you made the right decision?" "Martha, if we accept this money, we'll be saying it's okay to steal as long as you pay later. And other families who were harmed will continue without justice. I agree with you, Frank. Dirty money doesn't bring anyone happiness." The refusal of the settlement offer angered their opponents even more. Frank began to receive pressure from all sides. The manager at the bank where he had had an account for years suggested he renegotiate his small loans under stricter terms. The animal feed supplier said he could no longer sell on credit as he always had. Even the mechanic who had always repaired his equipment started charging higher prices. "Dad, they're trying to break you financially so you'll give up," observed Michael. "Michael, that just shows how desperate they are." But the economic pressures were really tightening the family's budget. Frank had to make some cutbacks to keep the bills paid. It was at this moment that unexpected help appeared. The families in the group decided to create a common fund to help each other during the difficult period. "Frank, you're fighting for all of us," said Mrs. Rose. "It's only fair that we all help you stand firm." "Folks, I can't accept financial help from you," Frank protested. "Frank, it's not a favor, it's justice," said Mr. Benjamin. "You're under pressure because you're at the front of our fight." The group's support deeply moved Frank and his family. They realized they weren't alone in that battle. Helen Thompson also offered financial help, but Frank politely refused. "Mrs. Helen, you're already helping us a great deal with the documents. We don't need money. Mr. Frank, I feel it's my duty to help the families my grandfather harmed. You're helping in the most important way, with the truth." Finally, after months of preparation, the date of the first court hearing arrived. The courtroom was packed with people from the involved communities. Frank was nervous, but determined. He had chosen his best clothes for the occasion, an old suit he only wore to weddings and funerals. "Dad, you look handsome," said Jessica, straightening her father's tie. "Daughter, I never thought I'd one day set foot in a courtroom fighting for my rights." "Dad, you're making history. Regardless of the outcome, you've already shown that ordinary people can fight against the powerful." The hearing was emotional. Jessica presented all the evidence in an organized and convincing manner. The tractor documents, the confessional letter, the nurse's diary, the retired accountant's records, and especially the personal diary of William Thompson. The Thompson family lawyers tried to discredit the evidence, claiming it was too old and could have been forged. But the judge, a serious woman of about 40, seemed impressed with the quantity and quality of the evidence. "Counselor, how do you explain that so many independent documents point to the same conclusion?" she asked the defense attorney. "Your Honor, there could be a conspiracy to harm my family," he replied without much conviction. "A conspiracy that would involve people from different generations, including the very author of the alleged frauds confessing in his personal diary?" The lawyer didn't know how to respond properly. During his testimony, Frank spoke simply and directly about everything he had discovered. "Your Honor, I bought an old tractor just to work on my little piece of land. I never imagined I would discover that my family had been robbed for decades." "Mr. Frank, what do you hope for from this court?" "I hope the truth comes out, Your Honor, and that other families don't go through what we went through." Helen Thompson's testimony was the most moving moment of the hearing. "Your Honor, I am here against my own family because I believe justice is more important than wealth." "Mrs. Helen, do you understand the implications of what you are doing?" "I understand perfectly. And if I had found out sooner, I would have done it sooner. After 2 days of hearings, the judge said she would analyze all the evidence carefully before giving her sentence. The case will be decided on its merits within 30 days, she announced. Frank left the courthouse with mixed feelings. He was proud to have made it that far, but anxious about the outcome. "Dad, you did very well," Jessica comforted him. "Now we wait." The 30 days of waiting were the longest of Frank's life. He tried to maintain his normal routine, tending to the animals and the garden, but he couldn't stop thinking about the trial. Martha noticed her husband's anxiety and tried to distract him with activities. "Frank, how about we fix up that little corner of the house we've always wanted to fix?" "Good idea, Martha. Working with my hands helps calm my mind." During those weeks, Frank received support from people he didn't even know. Letters arrived from other towns, from people who had read about the case in the newspapers. One letter that especially moved him came from a group of retirees from Philadelphia. "Mr. Frank, we know you are fighting not only for your rights, but for the rights of all honest workers who have been harmed by greedy people. We are rooting for your victory." On the eve of the final judgment, Frank couldn't sleep. He stayed on the porch looking at the stars and thinking about everything that had happened since he found those documents in the tractor. "Grandpa Joseph, if you're watching from somewhere, know that we didn't give up," he murmured to the starry sky. Martha appeared on the porch with 2 cups of coffee. "Couldn't sleep either." "Me neither, Martha. Tomorrow our lives could change forever." "Frank, regardless of the outcome, I am proud of you. You showed you have the courage to fight for what is right." On the day of the final judgment, the courtroom was even more crowded than at the first hearing. People had come from various towns in the region to hear the decision. The judge entered the room with a serious expression. Frank felt his heart race. "After a thorough analysis of all the evidence presented, this court has reached the following conclusion." She began to read the sentence. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. "The evidence presented by the plaintiffs is abundant, consistent, and convincing. The documents found in the tractor, corroborated by witness testimonies and the historical records presented, unequivocally prove that there was a systematic scheme of fraud in rural property deeds." Frank held Martha's hand tightly. "Therefore, this court rules that the properties in question be returned to their legitimate owners or heirs, as specified in the annex to this ruling." A murmur of emotion filled the room. Some people began to cry with joy. "Furthermore, the defendants shall pay compensation for moral and material damages to the affected families in an amount to be determined in a subsequent settlement." Frank couldn't believe what he was hearing. They had won. "The ruling is final and unappealable, as the evidence is irrefutable, and there is no room for delaying appeals." When the judge left the room, people erupted in celebration. Frank was surrounded by neighbors and friends who congratulated him emotionally. Jessica was crying with joy. "Dad, we did it. We really did it." Michael hugged his father tightly. "Dad, you are a hero. You showed that justice still exists." Mrs. Rose, Mr. Benjamin, and all the other families in the group surrounded Frank with gratitude. "Frank, you changed our lives," said Mrs. Rose with tears in her eyes. "Everyone, this victory belongs to all of us," Frank replied, moved. Helen Thompson approached Frank. "Mr. Frank, thank you for giving me the opportunity to do the right thing. Mrs. Helen, you have a courage that few possess, going against your own family to defend justice. Mr. Frank, from today on, we are one family, the family of people who believe in the truth." In the days following the ruling, life in Oakfield changed completely. Frank recovered not only his original property, but also lands that had belonged to his grandfather. The first thing he did was stop paying the rent he had been paying for decades for a land that had always been his. "Martha, do you realize that from today on we don't have to pay rent anymore?" he said, still not completely believing it. "Frank, it's 30 years paying rent for our own land. 30 years, Frank. And now we can use that money to truly improve our lives." Mr. Benjamin recovered his cattle ranching lands and began dreaming again of expanding his herd. Mrs. Rose recovered her vegetable garden and was already planning to increase production to sell more at the market. Harold, the pharmacy owner, recovered his land by the reservoir and decided to build a small inn for fishermen. Each family used their victory in a different way, But they all shared the feeling that justice had been served. Mayor William Thompson resigned from his position after the ruling. He knew it would be impossible to continue governing after his name was involved in proven fraud. Helen Thompson bought a small house in Oakfield and decided to stay in town. "Mr. Frank, I want to be part of this community. I want to help rebuild what my family destroyed." Frank welcomed her with open arms. "Mrs. Helen, every person of goodwill is welcome here." Jessica opened her law practice in town and specialized in helping small rural landowners with land issues. "Dad, I found my true calling. I want to help more families like ours." Michael decided to stay in town permanently and helped Frank modernize the property. "Dad, with the land we recovered, we can diversify production and greatly increase our income." "Michael, the most important thing isn't the income. It's knowing that we are working on land that is rightfully ours." 6 months after the ruling, Frank organized a party on his property for all the families who participated in the fight. The tractor that had started it all was placed in the center of the property, restored and painted like a monument to persistence and justice. "Folks, this tractor changed our lives," Frank said in a short speech during the party. "It taught us that sometimes the most important things are hidden right in front of us." Mrs. Francis, the nurse who had kept the diary with William Thompson's confessions, was one of the guests of honor. "Frank, I kept that diary for 40 years, waiting for the right moment to use it. When I saw your courage, I knew the time had come." Mr. Walter, the retired accountant, was also at the party. "Frank, for 40 years I kept those documents without the courage to do anything. You inspired me to be brave even in my old age." Helen Thompson arrived at the party bringing her teenage daughter, who was seeing Oakfield for the first time. "Mom, what a beautiful town," the girl commented. "Yes, it is, honey. And all these people are our family now." During the party, Frank found a moment to be alone with the restored tractor. "Thank you, old friend," he said, running his hand over the shiny bodywork. "If it weren't for you, we would never have discovered the truth." Martha approached and stood by her husband. "Frank, do you regret buying this tractor?" "Never, Martha. It was the best purchase of my life." "Even with all the suffering we went through?" "Martha, the suffering is over, but the justice we achieved will last forever." The party lasted late into the night, with music, food, and many stories being told. It was the celebration of families who had recovered not only their land, but above all their dignity. When everyone had left, Frank stayed on the porch looking at his property under the moonlight. Michael approached his father. "Dad, what are you thinking about?" "I'm thinking that Grandpa Joseph must be proud of us." "I'm sure he is, Dad. We recovered his land and much more." "Michael, you know what the most important thing in all of this is." "What, Dad?" "It's that we proved that ordinary people can win when they fight together for the truth." Jessica came out onto the porch with a cup of coffee for her father. "Dad, you've become an example for the whole region. People from various towns are talking about our story. Honey, I didn't want to be an example of anything. I just wanted to get back what was ours. But Dad, sometimes you become an example without meaning to, and you've become an example that it's worth fighting for justice." A year after the verdict, Frank was working in the vegetable garden when he was visited by a television reporter. "Mr. Miller, we're doing a story about stories of overcoming adversity in the countryside. Can we talk?" "Sure, young man, but I don't know if our story is one of overcoming. For me, it was just a matter of doing what was right." "Mr. Miller, you faced a powerful family and won. If that's not overcoming, I don't know what is." During the interview, Frank told the whole story once again, from the purchase of the tractor to the victory in court. "Mr. Miller, what advice would you give to other people who are suffering injustices?" "I'd tell them to never give up. The truth may take time to come out, but it always does. And when honest people come together, they are stronger than any powerful person." The report was broadcast on state television and had repercussions across the country. Frank began receiving letters from people in other states telling similar stories. One letter that especially moved him came from a farmer from Montana. "Mr. Miller, your story inspired me to investigate the loss of my father's property. I discovered he was also a victim of fraud. Now I am gathering evidence to go to court. Thank you for showing me that it is possible to fight." Frank realized that his story was inspiring other people to seek their rights. "Martha, it seems our struggle has become an example for others." "Frank, that's a good thing. The more people know it's possible to fight against injustice, the better." 2 years after the verdict, Oakfield had become a different town. The families who recovered their lands invested in local production, creating jobs and economic activity. Frank became a respected leader in the rural community of the region. He regularly received visits from small landowners asking for advice on land issues. "Mr. Frank, I found some strange documents on the property I bought. Could you take a look?" Frank always handled these inquiries with patience and directed people to Jessica when legal follow-up was needed. Jessica's office had become a reference for rural rights in the region. She managed to recover lands for dozens of other families in similar cases. "Dad, we discovered the Thompson family scheme extended to other regions. We're already working with families from 5 different towns." "Daughter, you are doing very important work." "Dad, it all started with that tractor. If you hadn't had the courage to investigate, hundreds of families would still not know the truth." Helen Thompson had integrated completely into the community. She used part of her inheritance to create a foundation that offered free legal assistance to small rural landowners. "Mr. Frank, I want the rest of my life to be dedicated to correcting the mistakes of the past." "Mrs. Helen, you have already done more than enough. Your courage to go against your own family was crucial to our victory." "Mr. Frank, when you do the right thing, you've never done enough." On a Sunday afternoon, 3 years after the discovery of the documents, Frank was sitting on the porch looking over his property. Michael was working in the new greenhouse they had built. Jessica was playing with her small children in the yard. Martha was cooking for the family lunch that happened every Sunday. "How life can change, isn't that right?" he thought, looking at the restored tractor that remained in the center of the lot. Mrs. Rose arrived with a basket of vegetables from her expanded garden. "Frank, I brought a few things from the garden for you." "Mrs. Rose, you don't need to bring something every week." "Frank, you are my family now. It was you who gave me the courage to fight for my rights." Mr. Benjamin appeared with a piece of meat from the cattle he had started raising again. "Frank, this is from the first steer born on my recovered land. I want to share it with you." "Mr. Benjamin, what a joy to know you've returned to raising cattle." "Frank, I had lost hope of ever being a rancher again. You gave me back my dream." During the Sunday lunch, Frank looked at everyone around the table and felt deeply grateful. "Everyone, I want to thank God for giving us the strength to face this fight." "Dad, you are the one who gave us strength," said Jessica. "No, daughter. The strength came from the union of all of us. Alone, I would never have accomplished anything." After lunch, Frank went to the tractor for his weekly chat with the machine that had changed his life. "Old friend, another week has passed. Life is good. The family is united. Justice was done." Martha approached, as she always did at that moment. Frank, still talking to the tractor. "I am, Martha. He's part of the family now." "Frank, do you regret anything that happened these years?" Frank thought for a few moments. "Martha, I only regret one thing, that it took me so long to discover the truth. How many other families could have been helped if I had found those documents earlier?" "Frank, everything has its time. You found the documents at the right time when you had the courage and maturity to do something with them." "You're right, Martha. Maybe when I was younger, I wouldn't have had the courage to stand up to a powerful family like the Thompsons." "Frank, you've always been courageous. But sometimes courage needs experience to know when and how to act." That afternoon, Frank received a phone call that surprised him. It was a lawyer from Washington, D.C. "Mr. Frank, we are organizing a national seminar on rural property rights, and we would like to invite you to share your experience." "Doctor, I'm not a public speaker. I'm just a simple farmer." "Mr. Frank, your story has inspired many people across the country. Your experience can help other families who are going through similar situations." Frank accepted the invitation, even though he felt insecure about speaking to a large audience. "Martha, they want me to go to Washington, D.C. to talk about our story." Frank, you should definitely go. Our story needs to be known by more people. But Martha, I've never spoken in public. What if I say something wrong? Frank, you don't need to speak fancy. You just need to speak the truth, and you know the truth better than anyone. A week later, Frank was on an airplane for the first time in his life, going to Washington, D.C. Jessica accompanied him on the trip. Dad, are you nervous? Very, my dear. I never thought I'd set foot in a place like Washington, D.C. Dad, you deserve to be there. Your story is important and needs to be known. The seminar took place in a large hotel with hundreds of participants from all over the country. Frank felt intimidated at first, but when he started telling his story, the audience fell into absolute silence. I bought an old tractor just to work on my small property. I never imagined that purchase would change my life and the lives of so many families. Frank told the whole story, from the discovery of the documents to the victory in court. When he finished, the audience gave him a standing ovation for several minutes. After the talk, several people approached Frank to tell their own stories and ask for advice. Mr. Frank, my family lost land in a similar situation. Do you think there's still time to fight? My friend, it's never too late to fight for the truth. If you're in the right, you have to go after your rights. Back in Oakfield, Frank felt transformed by the experience. Martha, I discovered that our story can really help other people. Frank, that makes me very proud. You all suffered so much, but that suffering is now serving to help other families. In the following months, Frank received invitations to tell his story in other cities and states. Whenever possible, he accepted the invitations. In every place he visited, he found families with similar stories of land loss under suspicious circumstances. Folks, the most important thing is not to give up, he always said at the end of his talks. The truth may be hidden, but it always exists, and when we fight together, we are stronger than any powerful person. 5 years after the discovery of the documents, Frank was again on the porch of his house, looking over his property at dusk. The property had grown and modernized. They now had a small agribusiness processing the products from Martha's garden. Michael had implemented modern irrigation systems and diversified the production. Jessica had built her house on the property and was raising her children there near her grandparents. Her law office had become a reference in the region. Helen continued to live in the city, and her foundation had already helped hundreds of families recover their land. Frank, what are you thinking about? Martha approached with 2 cups of coffee, as she always did at that time. I'm thinking about how our life has changed, Martha. Has it changed for the better? It's changed for the better in every way. We got our land back, united our family, brought justice to many people. Frank, do you feel fulfilled? Frank thought about the question for a few moments. Martha, I feel at peace. We did what we had to do. We fought for the truth, and we won. At that moment, a car arrived at the property. It was a young couple with a small child. Good afternoon, are you Frank Miller? Asked the man. That's me. How can I help you? Mr. Frank, my name is Charles and this is my wife, Anne. We came from Colorado after hearing your lecture back in our city. Frank remembered the lecture he had given in Denver a few months earlier. I remember you, yes. You were sitting in the front row. That's right, Mr. Frank. We came here to tell you that we followed your advice. We investigated the loss of my grandfather's land and discovered it was indeed fraudulent. And then, what did you do? We filed a lawsuit, Mr. Frank, and we won the case last week. Frank was deeply moved. What immense joy, my children. Congratulations on your victory. Mr. Frank, we want to thank you. If it weren't for your story, we would never have had the courage to fight. Folks, the courage was inside you all along. I just helped you discover it. Anne, Charles's wife, had tears in her eyes. Mr. Frank, we recovered 100 hectares that belonged to Charles's great-grandfather. Our son will grow up on the family land. Frank looked at the small child sleeping in his mother's arms. This boy is lucky to have brave parents like you. After the couple left, Frank was emotional thinking about how his story was inspiring other families across the country. Martha, did you see? Another family has recovered their land because of our fight. Frank, that's beautiful. Our pain has turned into strength for other people. Martha, do you know what this means? What, Frank? It means that old tractor didn't just change our lives. It's changing the lives of families all across America. That night, Frank had trouble sleeping, but not from worry. It was from emotion. He thought about how many families had already been indirectly helped by the discovery he made in the tractor. The next day, he received a call from a journalist who was writing a book about stories of overcoming adversity in the countryside. "Mr. Frank, we would like to include your story in our book. Do you authorize it?" "Of course, young man. If our story can help more people, I certainly authorize it." "Mr. Frank, what title would you suggest for the chapter about your story?" Frank thought for a few moments. "How about The Tractor That Changed a Town?" "Perfect, Mr. Frank. That's exactly what happened." 6 months later, the book was published and Frank's story became even more well-known. He began receiving letters from readers all over the country. One letter that particularly struck him came from a retired teacher from rural Arizona. "Mr. Frank, I read your story in the book and cried with emotion. My family also lost land under suspicious circumstances many years ago. At 72, I thought it was too late to do anything, but your story gave me courage. I'm gathering documents to investigate. Thank you for showing me that it's never too late to fight for justice." Frank showed the letter to Martha. "Martha, look at this. A 72-year-old lady is going to fight for her family's rights because of our story." "Frank, what a beautiful thing. You planted a seed of courage that is sprouting all across the country." That year, Frank was invited to receive an honor at the House of Representatives in Washington, D.C., in recognition of his contribution to social justice in the countryside. "Martha, they want to give me a Merit Award plaque." "Frank, you deserve that and much more." "Martha, I'm just a simple farmer who bought an old tractor." "Frank, you are a simple farmer who had the courage to fight against injustice, and that made all the difference." During the ceremony in Washington, D.C., Frank felt a little out of place in the formal environment, but proud of the recognition. "Mr. Frank Miller, your story is an example of how the persistence and courage of ordinary people can transform unjust realities," said the congressman who paid the tribute. Frank thanked him emotionally and took the opportunity to make a request. "I would like to ask that you representatives create stricter laws against land document fraud. Many families across the country are going through what we went through." Frank's request was well received, and some lawmakers committed to studying bill proposals in that regard. Back in Oakfield, Frank found his town even more transformed. Rural tourism had begun to develop, attracted by the story of the town that overcame injustice. Visitors came to see the famous tractor and hear the story directly from Frank. "Mr. Miller, can we take a picture with you and the tractor?" the tourists would ask. Frank always obliged kindly, briefly telling the story to each group of visitors. One day he was visited by a documentary filmmaker who wanted to make a film about his story. "Mr. Miller, your story has all the elements of a great movie. Injustice, struggle, unity, the triumph of truth. Son, if the film can help other people learn about their rights, I give my permission." The documentary took a year to produce and was shown at national and international film festivals. Frank was invited to accompany the film at the Sundance Film Festival. "Martha, I never thought our life would become a movie." "Frank, our life became an example, and examples need to be shared." During the film screening, Frank was moved seeing his story told on the big screen. When the film ended, the audience gave a standing ovation for over 10 minutes. "Mr. Miller, how do you feel seeing your story in the cinema?" asked a journalist. "I feel honored, but mainly hopeful. I hope this film inspires other people to fight for their rights." The documentary won several awards and was broadcast on national television, reaching millions of viewers. After the TV broadcast, Frank received hundreds of letters and emails from people all over the country, telling similar stories and asking for advice. Jessica had to hire a secretary just to help answer the messages. "Dad, you've become a national symbol of the fight for justice in the countryside." "Daughter, I only did what anyone should do. I fought for what was right." "Dad, but not everyone has the courage to stand up to the powerful like you did." 10 years after the discovery of the documents, Frank was again sitting on the porch looking over his property. Now there was a small rural inn on the property, managed by Michael. Tourists from all over the country came to see the place where the famous tractor story happened. The family's agribusiness had grown and employed several people from the region. Jessica's office had become a non-profit that offered free legal assistance to small landowners across the state. Helen Thompson had expanded her foundation to other states, always with the goal of helping families recover lands lost to fraud. "Frank, are you happy with everything we've achieved?" asked Martha, bringing the afternoon coffee. "Martha, I'm more than happy. I'm at peace with my life." "Frank, if you could go back in time, would you do it all again?" Frank thought about the question, looking at the tractor that remained in the center of the property like a monument. "I would do it all again, Martha, and I'd do it sooner if possible." "Why?" "Because I discovered that when you fight for the truth, you're not just fighting for yourself, you're fighting for everyone who came before and everyone who will come after." At that moment, a bus of tourists from Pennsylvania arrived at the property. "Mr. Miller, can we see the tractor and hear the story?" asked the group's guide. Frank stood up with a smile. "Of course you can. I'll tell the story of how an old tractor changed our life and the lives of so many other families." As he told the story to the group of tourists, Frank could see how moved people were by every detail. "Mr. Frank, how many families have reclaimed their land inspired by your story?" asked one woman from the group. "Well, I've lost count, but I know it's hundreds of families all across the country, and every time I get a letter telling me about another victory, my heart feels all warm." After the tourists left, Frank went back to the porch. "Martha, do you know what the most amazing thing about this whole story is?" "What, Frank?" "It's that it all started with a simple purchase. I just wanted a tractor to work with. I never imagined that tractor would spark a revolution in awareness about land rights." "Frank, sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest actions." "That's true, Martha. If I hadn't been curious enough to fiddle with the tractor's broken seat, none of this would have happened. Frank, but you were curious because you're a restless person, someone who doesn't just accept things as they are when you feel something is wrong." Frank smiled, remembering the day of the discovery. "Martha, that day changed our lives forever." "Frank, that day changed a lot of people's lives forever." That night, Frank wrote in his journal, a habit he'd developed since the beginning of the fight. "Today marks 10 years since I found the documents in the tractor. 10 years that transformed our life and the lives of hundreds of families across the country. I've learned that the truth always exists, even when it's hidden. I've learned that ordinary people can win when they come together for justice. And I've learned that our fight was never just ours. It belonged to everyone who believes it's possible to live in a fairer world." End of story. Now tell us what you thought of this moving story. Do you think Frank made the right decisions by taking on such a powerful family? Leave your honest opinion in the comments. We love reading what you think, and if this story touched you in some way, don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other inspiring stories like this one.